The House takes action on state budget cuts. The governor and the Republicans say they're both tackling burdensome regulations, and work begins on lifting the state's charter school cap. Next.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. We'll begin with the Balanced Budget Act that passed the House this week. It's already cleared the Senate, and as of right now, it only needs the governor's signature to become law, but that's not a guarantee. The bill would give Governor Gov Perdue the authority to cut at least $400 million in current state spending, but also shift money away from popular job incentives funds to help plug an upcoming state budget gap. The House passed by a party line vote a package of money-saving proposals where the state could cut spending now in anticipation of a budget deficit next fiscal year. Governor Perdue would be allowed to cut $400 million in current state spending. Money that's unspent by certain state groups would be seized to help offset the budget deficit, and cash would be redirected away from job development and other state funds to help bolster the state's general fund.
$3 billion structural deficit in the budget that was passed last year, over $3 billion. And everybody in this chamber knows that. When are we going to get serious? We have a crisis on our hands. This is a financial crisis that we have not seen in this state since the Great Depression.
House Democrats seem to support many provisions of Senate Bill 13, saying some of these savings provisions are already underway.
The $400 million of reversions to $236 million that were left on the bottom line, that's money that's there. Some of these other cuts, the money will revert if they're not spent at the end of the year.
But the Balanced Budget Act's move to shift money away from jobs, incentives, and creation funds, including the Job Development Investment Grant Program called JDIG, drew some sharp opposition.
$2 million, $3 million, ladies and gentlemen, is an eyelash in what we're getting ready to do. $3.7 billion, it's a rounding error, it's a hiccup. So why in the world, ladies and gentlemen, would you want to cut the #1 ranked job incentive program in the country?
House Democrats say North Carolina's competitors see an advantage if Senate Bill 13's job development cuts take effect.
I saw some articles in South Carolina papers already. They're really happy we're doing this because it's going to bring business to their states.
House Speaker Tom Tillis called a press conference Thursday afternoon. He says jobs money directed towards deficit reduction is unclaimed money. He says that no one can show him an incentives project that is threatened by these proposed cuts.
I'm tired of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I respectfully request any chamber president, any EDC president, any EDC manager, anybody who can point to a specific proposition that get job proposition, creation proposition that gets killed by this bill to come forth. And if they convince us, it'll get restored. That's the beauty of being a lawmaker.
During the afternoon of House floor debate on the Balanced Budget Act, Governor Perdue released a video on YouTube. She says the expected budget deficit won't be so bad.
I'm happy. Happy isn't strong enough. I'm over the top happy to announce that our estimated budget shortfall for this biennium has dropped by 30%. That means to all of us that instead of having a $3.7 billion shortfall, we will have instead a $2.7 billion shortfall for the next fiscal year.
Barry Smith with M2Mpolitics.com is here. Barry, you have seen that video from Governor Gov Perdue. $2.7 billion. We've heard larger numbers. Which is it?
It's fluid, as Speaker Tillis said. It's probably somewhere between $2.7 billion, $2.9 billion, and we won't really know until we get further on into the year. You know, we've got people are filing their taxes now. We don't know how many refunds have got to go out. Usually around April, the middle of April, when people file their taxes, we get a little bit better idea. Then, as more taxes come in, we know better around the middle of the
You pay
summer.
your taxes, you count the cash, and we'll see where we are. Well, let's talk about this bill, Senate Bill 13, the Balanced Budget Act. What's so contentious about it that it was a party line vote? It seemed it gives the governor powers to cut, and it takes money from other places as well.
It gives her powers to cut, but it also tells her that she's got to cut certain items. And, you know, North Carolina traditionally has had a very strong legislature and correspondingly a relatively weak governor's office. Well, that didn't matter all that much when they were both controlled by the same party. Well, now you have the legislature totally under the Republican Party, and the governor's office the governor's a Democrat. So it becomes quite a bit more contentious, and the Democrats within the legislature are siding with the governor.
Is it the idea that Republicans don't tell the governor what to do, or is it what they're telling her to do? She and her party disagree with the philosophy and the actions on it.
Well, they made their point that they disagree. And, you know, just kind of as a side note here, I think this is really foreshadowing of what we're going to be seeing come, you know, April, May, June, when we really get into the meat of putting a budget together for next year. But, you know, there were some Democrats who voted against this bill who have been against economic incentives packages that have been offered to various companies.
Do you find that odd?
I find it somewhat surprising, but you know, when you get on a partisan issue, a lot of times they will side with their party.
Is the core of this philosophy Republicans have a vastly different idea than Democrats on what it takes to create jobs?
I think you're hitting on one good point there. I think Republicans think that, you know, the private sector creates the jobs, and we need to be saving money now so that we don't have to take more money out of the private sector next year. I think the Democratic representatives and the governor feel like that the government has a larger role in creating jobs, and that they want to use this money to help create jobs.
Millions of dollars will come out of job development, job incentives funds to help shore up the general fund and offset that state deficit. How damaged will these funds be by losing a deposit, you know, incoming?
The Republicans say there won't be any damage. They say that these funds, you know, they're there. They're not going to be spent. You know, the money's going to be there anyway. It hasn't been committed. The Democrats say, well, but what if in the next 2 weeks, 3 months, we have a business that wants to come in and, hey, they need some of that money, and it's not there, then they might lose those jobs. So that's kind of the debate that we saw on the floor.
You have a governor in the middle of this. Where does this place her politically? She can sign it. She could potentially veto it.
Or she could just let it become law without and sit there for 10 days and it becomes law. She wanted the authority to cut about $400 million all across state government. She's got pretty broad authority within the budget, but we're not really in a budget crisis, quote, you know, is the way the state statutes say. And that is because the revenues are actually coming in at a little bit better than we expected. But we know we have this budget gap coming July the 1st, and we're wanting to prepare for that. So she has actually asked for some of this authority. Part of this she wants. She just didn't want the extra part of being told, hey, we got to take from this job development fund, this incentives fund, Golden Leaf Fund, you know, or some of the trust funds. She didn't want to be told we have to do that.
Barry, we'll see you just a little bit later in the show to talk about another bill, Laura's Law.
Okay.
Governor Gov Perdue and Senate Republicans both say they are, quote, doing something about eliminating state regulations and rules they believe hurt job creation. The governor rolled out hundreds of rules this week she says are outdated. The Republicans say they want some public feedback first. Senate Republican leaders and Governor Gov Perdue traded press conferences this week. Both were touting new efforts to reduce state rules and regulations.
The governor's been talking about moving forward with making the business climate in North Carolina better for the past 2 years and dealing with regulation over the past 2 years. We've been in the majority in the North Carolina Senate for 2 weeks, and we're actually doing something about it. And we expect these to be effective steps to address what is a real problem with job creation.
This was my next step as we reset. You've seen my consolidation. There's a whole package of stuff. I refuse to get in this partisan battle. I don't think the people of North Carolina want a partisan battle.
The governor offered a list of 900 regulations she is asking the General Assembly to remove from the books. She's promising to offer 1,000 more rules for elimination.
When you go through this list, you'll be some that said, how in the world could they have been rules? And there will be some that you're just flabbergasted at, but we'll make this list public for you all to look at.
The governor says this original list of 900 rules slated for removal are outdated rules. They have no or little effect on anyone anymore. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger says his GOP efforts will include getting outside of Raleigh to hear the public's input on regulation removal and rulemaking policy reforms.
Is it the regulation, or is it the application, or is it a little bit of both, or a lot of both? Those are questions that we really need to have answered.
Step one for the Senate Republicans in tackling bad regulations is putting the brakes on state regulators' ability to issue new rules while they hold some public hearings. A bill passed this week in the Senate forbidding agencies from issuing rules if those being regulated would incur additional costs. Exceptions will be made for serious health and safety needs, congressional acts, federal regulations, court orders. Supporters say this is a regulation timeout. Skeptics who read this bill say it could be a permanent timeout.
It'll last as long as we need for it to last. That's the simple answer to it. We're going to have this Regulatory Reform Commission or committee joint between House and the Senate, and we're going to go out and we're going to hit the road and solicit testimony from all those that want to come forward, and we're going to see, see what's working, what's not working.
I certainly understand the intent of this bill is to reduce red tape, but we would urge the Senate and the General Assembly to be very cautious. There are many regulations which, as someone said in this committee discussion earlier, actually provide more benefit than any costs that they impose.
The Senate and House GOP are establishing a new Rules and Regulations Review Committee. This is that group that will hold those public hearings on state rules and regs. 8 senators and 8 House members will be assigned to this committee, and it's expected they will review the governor's list of 900 regulations she wants eliminated. The committee members could be known next week. We'll follow it. The Senate has also created its own group that will review the effectiveness of state programs. Cleveland County Senator Debbie Clary will chair the Program Evaluation Committee. The committee will hunt overlapping state services and other bureaucratic redundancies. Nearly 50 House members seek term limits for future House speakers and Senate presidents pro tem. The bill carries House Speaker Thom Tillis' sponsorship. North Carolina voters, you would decide whether these top legislative posts would operate under a 2-term limit. Each General Assembly term is 2 years long. The amendment would be offered for voter consideration during the November 2012 election.
Well, we've seen here in the recent past in the legislature what some might call political dynasties develop, particularly on the Senate side, less so in the House, although we did have a speaker who was going to be there for several years until he got in trouble legally and had to resign and then go to prison. So it is something that is designed to keep the dynasties from happening again.
Senate and House chamber leaders of the 2013 legislature stand to be affected by that bill. House Republicans have brought their health care reform repeal bill to the Senate. It happened this week. It would exempt North Carolinians from the federal law requiring them to purchase health insurance or pay penalties. It doesn't target the entire health care law, and it would force Attorney General Roy Cooper and his team to fight the federal health care legislation's constitutionality.
I believe we have a duty to represent our state, and in this case, our citizens. And if we do not step in the gap for the overreaching action by Congress on this one issue, then who will?
House Republicans told the Senate committee the federal health care law could carry a $1 billion negative impact over the next 7 years if it takes full effect. A substance called Mephedrone could be the next currently legal high that's banned in the state. Mephedrone is a stimulant that's also called meow meow. Senator Harry Brown's bill would label it as having no accepted medical use, no safe way to use it, and be an easy chemical to abuse.
If you talk to law enforcement, the potency of this drug and some of the other drugs in the other bill that we'll talk about has been hard to control. They're not consistent.
That other bill Senator Brown mentioned would ban a synthetic marijuana product known as K2. K2 possession would carry charges equal to possessing real marijuana. If someone is caught with over 35 grams of K2, that could earn a 7-year prison term and a $50,000 fine. An identically written bill sits in the State House. A bipartisan group of House members want to abolish state standardized testing in public schools. Their proposal would allow the state school board to adopt tests required by federal law or that could help North Carolina receive federal grants. The state board could not force any other standardized tests on local school districts. And of course, state testing in U.S. history, civics and economics, algebra, and physical science would be eliminated beginning with this fall school year. The Senate has begun work on allowing more charter schools in North Carolina. An education subcommittee began crafting the bill this week, amendment by amendment. A Senate Education Subcommittee spent time this week tweaking legislation that would lift the cap on how many charter schools can operate in North Carolina. Amendments large and small were offered, including a successful amendment holding public school teachers harmless for leaving traditional public schools for charter schools.
The aim is to make sure teachers are protected. If they're working in a public school, whether it be a charter school or traditional public school, their annual leave, their sick leave should be protected if they go back and forth. We don't want to harm teachers for going and choosing a different type of school where they could perhaps contribute in a greater way.
Senate Democrats are floating their own proposals in committee, including requiring that charter schools provide transportation for certain students, school lunches, and guarantees that geographic and socioeconomic concerns are part of a charter school student selection process.
We want to make sure that as we move forward that we have a comprehensive charter school legislation across North Carolina. We want to offer amendments that we believe that will make the bill a lot stronger today as well as tomorrow.
The subcommittee endorsed changing who writes funding checks to charter schools. The bill will require county governments to directly give funds to charter campuses, cutting out the local school district as a middleman.
Some of the local districts don't like the fact that there are charters for various reasons. It is, quote, competition. I think competition is a good thing, by the way, in anything, in schools in particular. But the fact they have to write a check over to that charter might just be one more sort of ding at the public school, and that's not the intent.
Senate Democrats were told some of their amendments would be heard at discussions scheduled for Valentine's Day week, with a subcommittee vote suggested soon after. 23 senators are sponsoring this bill. There are currently 99 charter schools throughout North Carolina. An effort to temporarily halt involuntary annexations in North Carolina has been renewed this session. Involuntary annexation moratorium bills have been considered before but have never made it into law. This bill would stop involuntary annexations through June 2012 so state annexation laws could be reviewed. City government lobbyists say current dialogue between them and involuntary annexation opponents has been productive this far. Without a bill like this, there's some disagreement on that point.
It's a real contentious issue, and it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. This issue cuts both ways. And it's an issue that we're trying to ask get the cities and towns together with property owners and homeowners to say we just want to take a break for about a year, but we have to be able to sit down with folks and have a conversation. We think that the passage of this kind of bill will throw a wet blanket on those conversations and won't get us as far as we need to go.
Nearly 20 senators are signed on as co-sponsoring this bill. In the state Senate, 26 votes is a majority. Texting while driving was banned a while back. Now driving while chatting into your cell phone could be next. There are House and Senate bills that would force drivers to use hands-free cell phone devices should they drive and talk. If you're a school bus driver, you could not use a cell phone at all while driving. Offenders would be fined $100 but would not receive any driver's license points. Several senators are proposing higher fines should you get caught speeding in a North Carolina public school zone. Lawmakers will consider raising the minimum school zone speeding fine from $25 up to $250. There are no other changes proposed for the existing school speeding laws on the books. The higher minimum fines would kick in December 1st. Some drunk drivers could face mandatory prison sentences under a bill you'll hear about in the coming weeks. It's called Laura's Law. Laura Fortenberry was killed by a man police say was driving drunk. The bill would let judges sentence repeat drunk drivers to mandatory jail terms and fine them $10,000. The jail term would carry no parole option. Representative Tim Moore says there's room for bills like this despite the legislature's focus on the economy.
And I appreciate the support that we're getting from our leadership for this kind of legislation to support toughening these laws. Because at the end of the day, not only do we need a prosperous state, but we need a safe state.
Barry Smith with M2M Politics is back with us. Of all the bills you could have followed, what about Laura's Law drew you into it to get some coverage for your readers?
Well, Laura's Law has to do with Laura Fortenberry, who was a 17-year-old girl, and 17-year-old is a girl. She was killed by a man who had been a repeated DWI offender back last summer, and a lot of people feel like that he shouldn't have been out driving, and we need tougher laws on repeat DWI offenders, repeat drunken drivers. So Representative Tim Moore and a lot of the Gaston and Cleveland County delegation have filed this bill that is named after Laura Fortenberry, which would increase penalties for repeat offenders of drunk drivers. Actually, it would increase the court costs for all DWI, people convicted of DWI.
Mandatory jail terms from the way I read the bill.
Yes, it would increase the jail term. It would increase the fine from $4,000 to $10,000, and it will increase the court cost by $100. And that's kind of significant because that's where they're actually going to get the money to pay for it. In this budget-tight year, they've actually found a way to pay for it so that it won't be a drain on the state budget.
Bills like these, it's hard to find people opposed to them, legislators opposed to them. Is this a slam dunk bill, or does it go the other way of some of these other bills named after people who were victimized, and where you hit a good debate, you think it's going to get there across the finish line, and then it just sort of fades away?
I don't know that any bill is a slam dunk bill. I think it will be heard out in judiciary committees and probably both the House and the Senate. It could be one of these at the 11th hour it finally gets passed. I know I've seen some of them that go over into the next session, and that is possible. What's really interesting is Michelle Armstrong, who is Laura's mother. She was at the press conference the other day, fighting back tears to talk about her loss, and she is committed to getting this bill passed and to increase the punishment on repeat DWI offenders. She said that she's going to fight for it until God takes her home.
What is it that some citizens can come down here and lawmakers rally to their cause, other citizens come down here and fight for their issue and don't get the feedback?
I think a lot of times when you get someone who is an innocent victim, and I think every legislator here says that could be my daughter or my son, or that could be my relative or my next door neighbor's daughter, I think it kind of hits home with them. Now, again, this has got a long way to go. It hasn't become law yet.
Barry, m2mpolitics.com, surf to it. We'll see you soon, buddy.
Thank you.
A Senate Judiciary Committee will get the first look at legislation to allow judges to run as partisan candidates. State Supreme Court Justice candidates, State Court of Appeals candidates, Superior and District Court candidates could declare a party affiliation and run in party primaries. Partisan court races would begin with primaries scheduled after January 1st, 2012. House legislation has been filed. It could relieve men of paying child support on children they did not father. Courts could require DNA testing for the father, mother, and the child whose paternity is under question. Now, a man who has publicly acknowledged paternity and he knows he's not the biological father of a child could not change his mind and seek relief from child support under this bill, which sits in committee. A House Judiciary Subcommittee will take up a proposal called the Castle Doctrine. This would allow people to use deadly force in defending themselves. Victims must legitimately fear for their lives if lethal self-defense measures are taken. We caught up with Representative Mark Hilton as he was walking in the House chamber to file his version of the Castle Doctrine. Here's what he said. Who decides what level of force was appropriate in defending yourself? Because the police would certainly be at a situation like that after the fact.
Well, there's still the DAs and things like that. They have discretion. They look at that and they try to match the law up. And so a lot of it's discretion of the DAs.
What has made this bill so tough to pass both chambers in prior sessions?
Well, we've had those who are anti-gun folks that led the General Assembly in the past. Now we've got Republican control, more pro-gun folks that's leading.
Committees have not seen this bill yet. We'll follow the debate. A House bill gets filed that will require the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program and Crisis Intervention Program to pay utility companies directly and on behalf of benefit recipients. Money paid out by those programs could only cover the heating and cooling bills for recipients, nothing else. County departments would make the payments, and they'd also sanction any benefits recipients who might cheat. Legislative Week in Review is always active online. You can make us a friend on Facebook. We'd love to see you there. Go to the Facebook search box, type in Legislative Week in Review, will pop up. If you use Twitter, we use Twitter quite a bit ourselves. Our Twitter handle is at NCN Legweek. Follow us there. And of course, the old-fashioned way is to email us. Yeah, old-fashioned. Legweek@unctv.org. And you can always visit our website to watch our videos from this show at unctv.org/Legweek. That's it for this week's show. We hope you'll find us online, send us a message, and of course, tune in again on television next week. See you soon.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.